With rising inflation, bank failures, and massive layoffs across multiple sectors, the future of the economy remains uncertain. It's no wonder the central banks have been getting prepared by stockpiling gold. At ITM Trading, we have spent over 27 years building a team of seasoned researchers and analysts who can help you prepare for any financial crisis. Our experts are ready to provide you with proven strategies to safeguard your wealth and assets in the event of an economic downturn or currency reset, which is frankly inevitable. Don't wait until it's too late. Schedule your free gold and silver strategy call by clicking on the link in the description below.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Black Swan Capitalist channel. Today we have a special guest joining us for a second time and a part two, Lynette Zang. She's the Chief Market Strategist from ITM Trading. Hi, Lynette. Thank you for joining us again. Glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be back, Vandell. Thank you so much for having me, both of you.
Oh, we're happy to have you here. We know you have a lot of insight and knowledge and wisdom to drop on the audience. Most definitely, so much has been going on recently. A lot of developments taking place. Yeah. Could I bring up something real quick before we really get into the meat and potatoes? So this whole submarine distraction. It's interesting because while that was covering the mainstream news throughout the whole week, there's a few points that I want to bring up and real news that actually took place. So Sam Bankman-Fried, you know, the guy who stole billions of dollars, the Fed dropped his 5 charges of his. So that was one thing. Secondly, the Pentagon accidentally provided $6.2 billion to Ukraine. Third thing is BlackRock and JP Morgan Chase are helping Ukraine set up a reconstruction bank, you know, to steer seed capital into rebuilding projects and drive private billions of dollars of private investments. So
never let a
that's
good
just
crisis go to waste.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you think of that? Do you think there's something big there with the whole submarine thing, or is it really just a distraction? I mean, what's your thoughts with everything else going on?
Yeah, I think it's just a distraction because that's what they do. They get you to look over here while they're doing all of this other stuff that is really not in your best interest over here. So I think it's not just the submarine. There's lots and lots of distractions. The market's rife with distractions. So, and it really prevents you from knowing what's going on. I mean,
yeah.
One of the things I find really interesting is that they are not talking about the SOFR LIBOR shift. It is dead silent on that interest rate benchmark shift, which is the biggest experiment that has ever been attempted, ever. And they're dead silent on it.
So could you tell us more about that, about the LIBOR?
Yeah, it's really significant. The LIBOR stands for London Interbank Offer Rate, which is the rates that banks would pay each other overnight. And it is just a stated rate. They created it in the 1980s, and it's embedded in every single contract on the planet, okay? In 2000, but what I mean by a stated rate, you would just have a handful of banks that would get together and say, gee, if I were going to loan you money overnight, this is what I would charge you. And if I were going to borrow money overnight, this is how much I'd be willing to pay you. But shockingly, in 2008, the traders were manipulating that rate for their benefit, away from the clients, but for their benefits. And the fact of that scandal got leaked. And since it got leaked, then the global central banks needed to create a new benchmark and take all of these trillions and quadrillions of dollars worth of contracts and shift them from the London interbank offer rate to, in the US, it's called the SOFR, which is supposed to be a market rate, except when you read the fine print and it's a market rate, except we're not counting this, or we're not counting that, we're not counting the other thing. So here's the problem. So that came up in 2012. is when that whole scandal leaked and that we started to shift. But it was supposed to be attempted, the shift was supposed to take place in 2021. And in 2019, they ran a test of about 80 trillion. And it was a big fat fail. The reason why I know it was a big fat fail, because it went dead silent after they ran the test, dead silent. But the way that you know it was a big fat fail was they came out and postponed it until, let's see, when? June 30th of 2023.
Okay.
So it failed. And the reason why it failed, and the issue that we have along with what we know is happening in the banking sector with the value of the bonds and the debt that they're holding, is that they could not get the SOFR interest rate to be exactly the same as the LIBOR interest rate. They couldn't get them to match, even with another special accounting fix, right? So what that means, and and the other thing that has me really concerned is maybe in the summer, I think it was, or last summer, they still had 610 trillion notional value in contracts to transition. I can't find that data anywhere. I mean, they have gone dead silent and the deadline is a couple days away.
Yeah.
So here's what the problem is. All of those quadrillion dollars worth of contracts, as soon as they change the interest rate, this is interest rate, this is market value. As soon as they make that transition, the market value changes. Well, if a corporation or a bank is valued based upon the market value of their underlying, and that shifts, well, then their whole valuation changes. So just like we saw in March with the regional banks going out, SVB, et cetera, the reason why they did that was exactly this reason. Interest rates had changed since once they bought those bonds, and the market value of those bonds are substantially lower. Right? And so you saw banks go out, and that issue has not been solved yet, because we've got every bank and most corporations, almost every corporation, also sitting on a ton of losses that if they just say, well, we're holding them to market or until they mature, then they stay at that market, but that's not the truth. So when you're talking about misdirection, I mean, are you hearing too much about this anymore?
Nope.
That was March. Okay, and you aren't hearing anything about the LIBOR SOFR shift. Now, do I think that there's going to be a massive eruption on June 30th? No, but I think that the underlying problems are getting a whole lot worse.
Of course. Got it. That makes more sense. Yeah. I was just about to ask you about the consequences after June 30th. And basically it seems that it's just going to add more pressure to the system that's already falling apart.
Exactly. And what nobody knows is what is going to be that one little piece that pushes it to past the point of any level of return.
Yeah.
Because
that domino.
Exactly. Because the real problem is we are at the end of the currency's life cycle. There is admittedly no purchasing power left.
Right.
And
it's getting worse.
Exactly. That's what that inflation shows you.
Yes.
And right. And so if you have no purchasing power left, and then the key tool, or even let's say tools that the central banks have to manage that, one are interest rates, right? And we already see, what's happening in the interest rate arena and the havoc that that's caused, especially in the treasury market.
Yes.
But the other is that confidence piece. And
which is the biggest one.
It is. This is a Ponzi scheme. You got to have that confidence and you got to have new money. Those are the two things that you need in any Ponzi scheme. Is you need that confidence and you need new money. And they're having problem in both areas. I mean, significant problems.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So go ahead, Versan. Did you have a question?
Well, not a question, really. I wanted to talk about your interview actually with Andrew Bustamante. I believe that's how you say
Yes.
his name.
Mhm.
He was a former CIA operative, and fascinating discussion, by the way.
Thank you.
But
Yeah, I thought
Yes.
it was really fascinating too.
yes, when we just talked about everything right here, and we're talking about perception. So there are two very important things that caught my attention. He said, number one, that governments always have a narrative to shape. And the second most important
Hmm.
part he said was that the CIA focuses very closely on perception management.
Hmm.
And that had me intrigued because when I look around at a lot of this mainstream news, and then you filter out all the BS, and you start to see the real narratives behind all of this, it concerns me really about what this means for the broader narrative and even the population, because they have absolutely no clue what's unfolding.
Hmm.
But like you said, I think we're at the end of this system, this monetary system.
Yes, we are.
And also, when you look at the debt, it's out of control. There's no way in hell that we're going to pay it back. So what are they going to do? They're going to default at some point, maybe not now, and they're going to introduce a new system. But
Mhm.
back to that, what he said is perception management. That's why it's so important. And that's really the best part I got from that interview.
Oh, absolutely. And it's something that I've actually focused on for many years because it was actually President Reagan in the 80s
Mhm.
that formalized that program. Perception management is not my term or even his term.
Mm.
That is the term of the program. Because if they can manage how you perceive things, then they are essentially managing how you move forward.
Yes.
And yeah, I mean, Reagan brought over Rupert Murdoch and
Mhm.
changed the rules so that he could own those media companies. And what do we have now? It actually goes back to what we were talking about. You've got just a few media companies that and they are really intertwined, especially with the AI that's coming up,
Mhm.
right? So the deal that they are the large tech companies with the media companies for them to provide the data for the machine learning, but keeping in mind the perception management, how accurate is the data that they're going to give these machines to learn and then spit it out to us as if it's the truth?
They have even more control now.
Exactly.
Yes, more control over your perception over things. Yes, it's
That's what
really
they're working
intense.
on.
Yeah,
It,
no doubt about that. Yeah, it's insane. Um, now go ahead, Lynette. Mhm.
No, no, I was going to say, and it's going to get even more insane and more intense as we move forward because the deep fakes, I mean, how are you even going to know? They can do avatars of the three of us, and is anybody going to know that it's us or
Yeah,
something not real?
perfect tool for blackmailing someone.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. But back to what we were saying about the monetary system, excuse me, the dollar coming to its end life cycle.
Mhm.
That is absolutely true. You're correct about that. Now, for what the central banks and governments are preparing for that time,
Mhm.
what do you think? Because I know there's a blockchain that has something to do with the new financial system, and you already know this, Lynette, but they always plan ahead, because if they don't plan, then they're planning to fail. So they're way ahead. They just pretend they're dumb.
Right.
It's all a
Oh,
show, but they know what they're
we're
doing.
gonna have to study this. Mhm.
What do you think is uh the next phase right now? I know we're at the end stages. The dominoes are slowly falling, but we haven't seen a financial collapse just yet. You got little
Right.
banks going out here and there, and
But
issues
it's
with
definitely brewing underneath the surface.
it's brewing, definitely.
I mean, it's building. The public just can't see it, but it is definitely brewing. And when you're looking at not just blockchain technology, but also smart contracts, because I'm a lot older than you, I remember when it was a much smaller
You don't
environment.
look that older than me.
Thank you
I'm
so
just kidding.
much.
You
I'm going to
don't.
be 69 in just a couple of
No,
months.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, it's true.
You're kidding.
No,
Well,
I'm
you
not
you really
kidding.
take care of yourself, so, and you smile a lot, which is healthy. So-
Well,
Anyway,
sometimes I have to smile or I would cry,
yes,
but
Good
but
point. Yes.
things used to be a lot more local, meaning that if I had a problem with something, I would go to the decision maker and I would say, here's my problem. And then that decision maker would want to solve my problem because they'd want to keep me as a customer, whether it's a government or it's a mom and pop shop, what have you.
Mhm.
But over the years and the growth of all of this technology has created a distance, right? So now if
Definitely.
you have a problem with something, are you going to get to a decision maker?
No, it's
You're
very
getting to a
difficult.
gatekeeper.
Yep.
So when you're talking about blockchain technology, smart contracts that lay on top of things, autonomous driving cars, distance between policy, this is what the central banks say, we want distance between their policy and how it's introduced to the public. That all goes back to what they want, which is a full surveillance economy. And the tech
Mhm.
companies have that data. The banks have the personal relationships. It's sticky. You don't change banks very often. That's something that is kind
Oh,
of a
absolutely.
very
Mhm.
pain in the neck. And so what we're looking at is kind of a merger of the two where they know everything about you. And then let's put some AI into the mix to nudge you. That's what they actually call it in perception management. It's nudging you in the direction that they want you to go
Right.
in, which frankly is to keep all of your wealth inside of the system because, hey, when a market crashes, who are you going to complain to? Right? If that's where you're holding your wealth, that's really why I like physical, tangible assets at this point in the
100%.
trend cycle. You know, at this point in the trend cycle.
Right.
Definitely. That's wealth protection right there. That's how you protect your hard-earned money.
Right.
I
Well,
think it's the best way.
my
Mhm.
brother and I, we have significant positions in precious metals. In fact, I've overdone it a bit, and I believe that
Well,
I'm
you can
making the
never
right
overdo
choice.
it.
I don't think so,
Um,
man.
I
Um,
agree. I am preserving all my wealth, and that's the way I see it. And people are saying, "Oh, it's going to dip, it's going to go up." Well, I keep telling them,
that's
"Listen,
irrelevant.
it's irrelevant. This is about preserving your wealth because we know the currency is dying. And at the same time, the price is what it is. It's because they are able to print money and manipulate the game still. Once they
And
can't do that anymore, these things are going to go through the roof."
Well,
and
it's not only that, but what people don't understand is that that's how they do the overnight resets. So right now, in the paper world, when it comes to the spot market, right, which is just a paper market, they can
yeah,
create as much gold and silver that do not nor ever will exist.
exactly.
But there is a completely different thing that's happening in the physical only world, which is like this, and
Real metal.
even, you know, in the silver, right?
Right.
So we have the spot markets in gold anyway, making a triple top, meaning that it goes up to this resistance level, hits it, and then backs off, goes up again, hits it, backs off, goes up again, hits it, and backs off. So there's a triple top that's happening technically, but if you look on the graphs that are physical only,
Mhm.
what you see is a breakout. So in other words, those are going up to more recent highs, whereas the spot market is bumping its head and the premium on silver is ridiculous. I just pulled
Yes.
this yesterday. I
Yeah.
think the spot on the 16th was, what was that? 2263 is where it closed, something like that. And the mint has just a 2023 Silver American Eagle for what was that, 76 bucks
Yeah.
or something like that.
Oh my. Yeah, I can
Yeah,
get them for like 32.
yeah. I mean, and on ITM, they're a
I have a
lot
good
less
source.
expensive too.
But to be
There you
honest with you,
go.
Lynette, any day I would trade that 76 bucks for a silver coin if I had the extra 76
Right.
because I understand what's going on.
Or you buy it
But
from ITM and it'd be a lot less. But
that's
I
actually
mean,
what I'll do.
I
Yeah.
just thought it was interesting that I just pulled that. And at the mint, this is not a proof coin. This is just a raw 2023 silver dollar, 76
Yeah.
bucks.
And
So,
go ahead. Mhm.
oh, Andy Scheckman.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Continue.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that that should show you that, and the fact that at SLV, so that the silver ETF, they changed their prospectus a couple of years ago because they couldn't pull enough silver from the markets to create the baskets. So,
Got
I
it.
mean,
Okay.
what does that tell you about the physical markets? Those are two different markets. One
Definitely.
is about trading and also perception management, because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. So that's why you had that triple top. It keeps trying to break out, but it keeps getting suppressed for that reason. And so when you're looking at, well, what are they trying to do? They want you in the system so that you are 100% dependent upon them. And once they institute those CBDCs using blockchain technology and smart contracts, then that means that they can dictate everything to you. What you
That's
can
some.
buy,
Mhm.
where you can buy it, how much of it you can buy. If you're buying too much, they can cut you off. I mean, then you have to do what they want you to do, or you've got problems.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, in regards to the central banks and particularly the International Monetary Fund, which is the IMF. So, the head of the IMF recently, Christina Georgieva, actually made a statement saying that they need to, well, they're working on a universal central bank digital currency, and it's a platform for it. So that's actually really frightening if you really think about it. We're not
Yes.
trying to, scare people watching. We're giving you this information so that you could be aware of what's going on and prepare strategically. But that's what she did say at a conference in Morocco. Now, what's interesting about that is in March of 2023, there was a report by the IMF titled Trust Bridges and Money Flows, a digital marketplace to improve cross-border payments. And interestingly, on page 23, they mention two digital assets, and that's XRP and XLM. Now, I'm with you 100% on wealth preservation, protecting yourself and your hard-earned money with gold and precious metals, silver. I think it's the best way. At the same time, I do believe in it's intelligent to take advantage of certain digital assets, and not for wealth preservation, even though who knows, it might happen, but for more of profit gain and creating wealth. So I see opportunity there. So for example, me, Lynette, I am diversified in both. I think it's intelligent and sophisticated to do that, based on what's happening now in comparison to the dot-com bubble. The experts were telling you stay away from investing in Amazon stock, Google stock. And this was when it was a couple bucks. So I think the same thing is playing out. And most of these digital assets or cryptocurrencies are going to go to zero and get weeded out. But there will be a select few that will be part of the new financial system. And I believe if you own it, it's kind of like owning a piece of software or technology that's going to be utilized for the financial system, and you will reap the rewards. That's how I see it. But I still believe 100% in the importance of owning gold and silver and precious metals. That's real money right there.
Well, that is, and diversification is very important. I've been in these markets on some level my entire life, so I can't sit here and tell you that I'm very diversified. Here's my diversification: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter.
I love it. I'm
Right.
with you.
But having said that, the Bank for International Settlements publishes their money flower. And there is a small space in that money flower for those private cryptocurrencies. So I agree with you that the winners of this have already been chosen.
I believe so.
right? And I think that you just named the two that are most likely that, and I think also Wall Street's totally adopted Bitcoin.
The
That
thing is with Bitcoin, I want to get your go ahead, Versan. I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, it's fine. You know what, Lynette, what is your take on Bitcoin? What do you think about it? It's okay.
We think it's going to go to zero because it's a threat to the CBDCs.
Well,
Some
Well,
point.
you know, look, I think that I don't think it was an accident when it came out, which was January 2009, and the quantitative easing experiment started in March. So when they're making the transition from one type of currency, fiat money, into another one, what they want is they want things to seem as normal as possible. And I think that first Bitcoin was used, and the other subsequent cryptocurrencies were really used to that end, get people used to it and more comfortable with it,
Absolutely.
right? And then we see reports from the IMF that say private crypto's bad, CBDC's good. So, you know, I think that it's more about getting people into a position to accept and
Conditioning.
adopt.
Yeah.
Conditioning, exactly. And you know, I'm not sure that it's working. I think they thought it would be much easier to transition people into it than it's turning out to be, which I'm very happy about, to
Interesting.
be honest
Well,
with you.
you know what's interesting about Bitcoin, and I know we're on the same page in terms of who we think created it. Probably NSA,
Right.
CIA,
I mean, that was a great
government.
1996
The
white
Mossad,
paper.
it's a
You
Mossad
mentioned that.
CIA.
What I discovered, and there was a lot of connections, but I'm not going to disclose everything, but just to make a long story short. So with Bitcoin, obviously you can make money through the volatility. You know, you buy it when it's down, you sell it when it's up, you know. So you can make money, and sure, probably it could go to 100,000, probably even more. But you know, people don't know what SHA-256 is. And so that's the algorithm behind Bitcoin's encryption. Now, SHA-256 was actually created and designed by the NSA. So, and not to mention, like you said earlier, Bitcoin was created in 2009, right after the 2008 crisis.
Yep.
So there's just so much data that is out there, if you get your hands on it and find it, that kind of indicate that Bitcoin is a government operation. And just as you said, it is to transition society into adopting and conditioning them to be to get used to digital currencies. And Bitcoin was the one that paved the way, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other point I'd like to make is that since the early 80s, 100% of everything has now been transitioned into a financial product, and it's set up for trading, right?
Yes.
Here's the challenge, though, because again, it is misdirection. It goes back to this, everything goes back to perception management, right? So you see Bitcoin, or you see the stock markets, or you see anything go up in nominal terms, and you're like, yeah, I want that. I want that. When in reality, the purchasing power value of what you can convert it into is going down, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it hides the truth. And it doesn't matter whether it's Bitcoin or it's stocks or
Any of it.
any
Yeah.
of it. Any of
I
it.
agree. Again, the narrative to get people in. Honestly, I'm over talking about blockchain now because I believe we've already positioned ourselves. We won. We've been telling people what the technologies are that are building the infrastructure for this new system. You want to invest on it, or you want to get left behind. It's up to you. So, you know, we're really done with that. What really is pressing me now is this another $500 million today to Ukraine again. And You know, what they're doing is so criminal. I want to shift the conversation a bit. What they're doing is criminal. They're hosting a proxy war in Ukraine
Yes,
without any
absolutely.
congressional approval. They're stealing taxpayer money of American, hard-working Americans to fight a threat that the US engineered. And they continue to weaponize the financial system and the
Mhm.
dollar with the world and their own citizens. So I want to know, what do you really think is going on in Ukraine? Why are we sending so much money over there?
100% this is a proxy war.
Yes. Mhm.
But here's the other piece. Whenever there is a change in the monetary system, war is always used as an excuse and a distraction. So this isn't the first time, but I think that what's really happening in the Ukraine is really between the US and China. But I'm not 100%, this is going to sound crazy, but I am not 100% convinced that it's really them against us, whether it's Russia and Ukraine or US and China, or since all of them are part of the IMF,
Uh,
right?
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
it isn't, and we've been watching all of these coordinated and synchronized movements, particularly since 2008. So in my mind, I'm not 100% convinced that it is a them against us, a real war, or maybe more as a distraction. And why not? When you know you're going bankrupt, why not just spend all the money that you can as long as
Right.
you can keep growing debt? Because the system is absolutely reliant on new money debt, like we were talking about, and the confidence. So
Agreed.
if people are looking at the war, and yes, you're right, when the government spends money, people don't realize this, but when the government spends money, they're spending your money, your taxpayer money.
Exactly. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
just going back to blockchain, I don't know, Gerald Celente brought this up, and I thought it was really
I like
quite.
that guy.
I do too. I love him. But,
Love
I
him.
mean, I thought it was really quite a brilliant thought. With all of this technology and particularly blockchain technology, I think each American citizen can vote directly for what they want. We don't need all of these representatives that don't really represent us to our best interest anyway. So why aren't they
Yeah.
talking about that?
Yeah. Good point. Very good
Perception
point.
management. I don't want you to
Right.
know. But
Unless
this is
they
what's
go
interesting
ahead.
is real. Well, no, exactly what you said. I was thinking the same thing. And I keep asking myself, I wonder if this is an engineered global event with the BRICS, the whole BRICS thing, and
It's all a
that could be a
show.
distraction too. Yeah, it could be. Could they all
Exactly.
be on this along with the United Nations? Because I think that's really where a lot of this is being perpetrated from. It's the United Nations, and they're not telling people this.
And they own the
But
World
they're-
Bank.
Right. And they're creating the illusion of divide so we don't see what's coming. And it raises the questions about, again, why the US would not want a reset. They're putting all the people in place within the administration to allow these banks to be consolidated. And
Exactly.
yeah, it's not an accident.
And
So I
shift the
think,
power to the big banks.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, we really do have monopolies, duopolies. I mean, we really all of this power and all of this wealth over time, especially since 2000, we've watched these consolidations take place. Never
Yeah.
let a good crisis go to waste. Whether
Oh, I
it's
don't.
right. And frankly, that's what the gold positions you for. It's not, silver is about preservation, and you can use different kinds of gold to do different things. But this also puts you in a position to take advantage of the crisis because
Now
it
on
holds your purchasing power.
Definitely. And on gold, Lynette, could you tell us a little bit about this for the audience? So we know there's so much data out there that supports the fact that the gold price should be actually higher than what it is.
Oh yeah.
No
Much
doubt.
higher.
Yeah.
Now, the value, or excuse me, the value is there, but the price will reflect at some point in the very near future, especially as things get
Mhm.
out of control.
Mhm.
So right now, even though gold might go for what, $2,000 an ounce, um, that's still a good bargain in terms of
Oh,
what is to come,
severely.
especially
Right.
with what's coming down the road,
Well, it's
getting rid of toilet paper for gold.
well, exactly. And there are a few things in what you were just talking about, because as we said earlier, a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. When you are
Mhm.
crystal clear that the currency is failing, you make different choices than you would otherwise. So they have to suppress it. But the piece is when, I mean, there's no doubt, since we're inside of a system, and this isn't just the US, this is globally, that money is created from creating more debt. The
Right.
intention to ever pay that debt off is not there,
Never has
because
been.
then you're destroying money, right? And
Absolutely.
so, right. So once you get to a point where you have saturated, and we know that that's true because of the lack of volatility in the US Treasury market. And this has been an ongoing problem, particularly since 2015. So this isn't new. This is just getting bigger and bigger.
More
So,
exposure and growing. Yes.
yes, exactly.
Mhm.
But with gold, how do you know how much it's worth? Because I say so, who am I, right?
Mhm.
This is how you know. If money is created from debt, how much debt is there in the world,
There we go.
right?
Yeah. Mhm.
We know we can account for like,
Quadrillions.
yes, definitely
Beyond.
quadrillions. So we know that there is a finite amount of gold, and we can account for 98% of it that's ever been pulled out of the ground. And every year, the Department of the Interior runs a study on in-ground gold. So we know how much gold there is. Now, they can create more debt as long as the world can accept it, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But what happens is, I mean, in order to deal with this unpayable debt, they have to create either a hyperinflationary, or if we get the CBDCs, hyper deflationary event to
Mhm.
burn off this debt to enter that new system clean. So
Right.
again, I go back and I say, well, how do you know how much gold is worth? Let's just do a really simple equation. I'm not going to get you to the penny, but I'm going to get you pretty close. Because when we go into a hyper circumstance, whether it's inflation or deflation, same
It's
thing.
happened
Just,
around the world before.
yeah, over 4,800 times, lots of
Yes.
times. When they need to get confidence back in the system, they put a component of gold in them. When they do those, they say, okay, like there's the gold. But when they do that overnight reset, they take this garbage that is used in one place, has no intrinsic value, and they revalue it
Yep.
against gold, which is all intrinsic value. It's all intrinsic value because it is used in every single sector of the global economy. So it has the broadest base of buyer, it has the broadest base of utility.
Mhm.
That's when you'll see gold start to express to its true value.
In the
So if you-
price,
Yep.
it will reflect.
Exactly, because that's how they do that.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
if you want to know the fundamental value of an ounce of gold, just take all the debt that's been created and divide it by
Divide
all
it.
the gold that exists. I mean, this is not rocket science,
Yeah.
right?
Probably
And-
like 30, 40 grand for an ounce.
Yeah, or more. It depends
Yeah,
if
or
you do it
more.
globally.
I think it could be more.
Yeah,
Oh,
more definitely.
definitely.
Well, the
Go ahead.
real quick, the thing is, this all started when Nixon took the gold off the dollar. Because
Correct.
what he did is essentially he gave
1971.
complete control to the central banks to print as much as they wanted to. And guess what they did with that? They devalued our currency. They made us poorer than ever. And most importantly, they built the military industrial complex.
Oh, yes.
And that's exactly what they did with it. So that's the real threat. They built an army
Huge.
and technology like we couldn't believe. And now we're fighting against the things we funded. Think about it.
Exactly. And I'll point out to you, because I did these studies, and when you talk about the military industrial complex, you would see, if you go back in history, there used to be maybe 40, 50 years between wars, right? So a country would go into war, they'd completely destroy the value of their currency, and then they'd give the population 40, 50 years to get over it, and they would do it again. But
Right.
and during that same period of time, central banks had a specific life, typically between 15 and 20 years, because governments knew that this was going to happen. They could then lay the blame on the central banks so that their hands were a little bit cleaner, right? And they could do it again. Well, it was Ron Paul that said, and I'm probably not getting this exactly right, but
Yes.
it's no coincidence that the era of perpetual war coincides with the era of perpetual central banking. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913 with a 20-year lifespan. That means they were going to be dead in 1933, which I think is kind of interesting.
Because that was the
Yes.
Bretton Woods Agreement.
No, the
No,
Bretton
I'm
Woods
sorry,
Agreement came in the
1944.
40s.
1944, but 1933 they confiscated the gold.
Correct. But in 1927, for the first time in history, they gave the Federal Reserve an unlimited charter.
That's
Okay.
right.
1928, that's when most of the industrialists sold their holdings, which were just Ponzi scheme holdings, just like we're at today, because that was also the first time when the public had more money to work with because of all the money printing that they did when they shifted from a pure gold standard, so a 1-to-1 basis, to a 2.4-to-1 basis. And so people felt rich. They wanted to do what the industrialists were doing. So they set up the public to take the fall. 1929, boom, they cut off credit. And you have the stock market crash of 1929 and the massive wealth transfer that occurred.
Yeah, and history is repeating itself again, but this could be the final wealth transfer because in a technocracy, that's something you can't fight. It puts you in a unique position where you can't do much. Even you can't even build a legacy for yourself with a central bank digital currency because there's an expiration date attached to that money. So how are you going to even build a legacy for your family? They don't want that. They want to have an oligarchy, and they want to have AI in the center running the middle, the poor, the new poor,
Right.
and you can't fight anymore. And that's why I keep urging people to wake the hell up, and you can't be afraid to speak out. You have to say
Right.
something. You have to try to put this information out there because I believe the only weapon we have is unity. And we are so divided right now by design.
By
If
design.
we can just spread this awareness and get everyone to be unified to a single collective consciousness, maybe there's a chance we can fight this.
And we don't really need a silent majority. We just, to your point, Versan, we need a very vocal minority. And that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what Gerald's doing. That's what, we've got a good army out there, but we're not going to get to everybody because what we're asking them to do is have a paradigm shift. And that means they have to admit that they've been lied to their entire lives. And who really wants to admit that?
Yeah, it's a hard truth to accept. And like you said, in 1929, when the market crashed, it's crazy because millionaires went broke.
Paper millionaires.
Yeah, paper millionaires. Now, this is just a side note, but in regards to inflation and money printing, the stupidest thing I've ever heard from the Biden administration is when they said inflation is because of Russia.
Yeah, they're looking someone to blame it on.
So they're trying to point at fingers over there. Yeah.
Oh, wait,
But,
I have
clearly-
another one. I mean, don't blame it on any of this. Don't blame it on the spending and the raising the debt ceiling on the money that you've already spent. I mean, it's a joke.
Quick question. Do you have one that shoots gold? Just
Uh,
kidding.
Oh, that would hurt.
I don't. That could be painful, though. No, I just hold my gold. I don't
That would
want to
be
shoot
very
it away
painful.
from me.
You want to keep it close.
I want to keep
So-
it close. Yes.
So there is a video. I mean, you've been watching Biden. He's been slipping up. I don't know if you saw the video of him saying he sold state secrets.
Oh, I didn't see
It was
that
so
one.
funny. Okay.
That sounds pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny. He was saying he sold state secrets. So what I'm trying to
Was
point
that
out
him
here is
or his
that
son?
no, it was Biden. Yeah. I believe that
You
they're
can't
building
tell.
the narrative. I believe they're building the narrative for him to maybe resign. And I'll tell you, this is very interesting. Look at this. 2017, he said this, and everything we see him doing today is playing this out. But just listen to this.
Principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. We don't.
He was talking about if he had some disagreements with Obama and things got out of hand in his presidency, he would develop some sort of disease and resign. And if you
Wow.
look at the narrative now being pushed around what he's doing, he's showing all these things of like, oh, I'm about to resign. This really ties into my last question of Nasara Jasara. And we get a lot
Okay.
of people saying all kinds of stuff, and they're saying that, oh, he's going to walk away and Trump's going to get back into the house and save the country. And, I just listen to this and I don't know what to say to some of these people, but I want to know what your take is on Nasara Jasara, if you don't mind.
Well, my take on that is that I think it's a lot of hopium, that somebody magical out there will just come down and go plunk and everybody's debts will just go away without any consequence. It's a nice thought,
Right.
but do I think that that's realistic? Probably not. But what do? You
Yeah.
you prepare for the worst, and then anything that's not that, you're in a good position.
You're in a good
So
position.
become your own central
Mhm.
banker so that you can pay off any debts yourself. I would not be counting on somebody outside of you for your
Right.
save yourself and save your family. And the way that I personally have done this is by making sure that I have enough gold
Mhm.
so that when we do that overnight reset, boom, I sell a little bit of gold, pay off that mortgage. I don't have any variable rate debt. I don't recommend variable rate debt for anybody because that's the piece that kills you
Mhm.
during this period. But I have a hard time thinking that any outside source is going to magically fly in and paper it. What are they going to pay it off with? This crap?
Right.
Although
Yeah.
that's actually my bill with my picture on it that says in gold and silver we trust. But that's what Nasara and Jasara don't really account for
Mhm.
is what are they going to pay all these debts off with?
Yeah.
I always thought it was a bit too much hopium in there. And whether there's a real white hat military operation going on to remove this cabal, if that's what you want to call it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't change your behavior. It
Doesn't
shouldn't.
change.
You
No.
still need to, stay out of debt, save more money, try to live
Well,
within the
not
means,
this.
and
Save more real money.
Yes.
more wealth. Yes, preserve more wealth. But I already always thought it was a bit far fetched.
It's I've revisited it many times over the years, and I just can't count on that because I like to look at things and say, okay, what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong? Great, if you're always right, then it goes exactly the way you want it to. But if I can make a choice that really doesn't matter whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, that's the choice that I'm going to make because it just covers all of the bases, right?
Yeah.
And
Makes
that's
sense. Mhm.
yeah, I mean, that's what, not just gold and silver. This is your foundation and it puts you in a position to take advantage. I mean, right now you've got real estate prices that are at nosebleed levels. That's going to change, right? They'll go down, this will come up. It puts you in a position to take advantage of what you can't stop anyway.
Mhm.
But there is
The
a whole
inevitable.
strategy around it just based upon repeatable patterns. And it's actually really simple. the biggest challenge that I have with a lot of this stuff is how complicated it is. If I have to be an engineer in order to understand how money works, I'm not an engineer. So do you think I could be taken advantage of? Yeah,
Definitely. Mhm.
right?
Well,
I don't have to be an engineer with this.
right. To your point, though, understanding basic economics and basic finance to get you an idea of how corrupt the system is and how it's designed to be weaponized against you and your
Oh, yeah.
savings and your future, it doesn't really take a lot of effort to learn the financial institutions. And
Yep.
that's when I kept doing research. My
Yep.
background is an engineer, and I went into finance in 2018 because I understood that something was wrong. And it took me very little to understand that how serious this is, and also how you can protect yourself.
Mhm.
So it didn't take much.
Right. Well, that's why I always include links on all my videos. Not all of the links that I research, because then it would be a book
Yeah.
every time.
That's
But, you know, so that people can, to your point, Versan, do their own due diligence. Don't take anybody's word for it. Don't take
Yeah.
those in power's word for it. They have an ulterior motive, and they are shaping and changing the discussion to move you, to nudge you in that direction. Just this, if you said to me, if anybody said to me, okay, Lynette, you can only ever work with one graph, one, it would be the purchasing power graph would be the one that I would choose, because it really tells the whole story right there, right?
Yep.
Here's your dollar's worth of purchasing power. Now officially you're at 3 cents. And as long as there is inflation, that's going down to 0. So wherever you were born between 1913, like I was born in 1954. In 1954, let's see, there was roughly about 40 cents worth of purchasing power out of the original dollar. Now there's 3 cents.
It's
So
crazy.
to your point, they have lied to you since the day you were born. And here's the other piece when you're talking about money and savings. The moment you get this garbage in your hand is the moment it has the most value. Every second after that, it has less and less purchasing power value, period. So by design, who gets that first? Central banks are the ones that create this. The corporations, right? The private corporations, the banks, they get it when it has the most value. Then the government after that, and the government has to pay more to get this garbage than the banks do.
Ponzi
Wait a
scheme.
minute.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And the states have to pay even more than the federal government or the corporations.
What a joke.
Yeah, it's a joke. Yeah.
But yeah, for those that are if you don't believe any of this, just go to the FRED, FRED. That is the Federal Reserve Education Department, and in the search bar, put purchasing power of the consumer dollar, and this is what's going to come up. And you're going to see it for yourself. That's them telling you, which means you know it's worse.
Mhm.
And the only thing, there's only one thing, because Wall Street has lost confidence in the Fed. When I see titles,
Oh,
who
yeah.
believes Powell, you know, on Bloomberg, you
Yeah.
know, what you always want to do is you want to make sure that this erosion doesn't impact you. I don't know exactly what it is at this moment, so maybe I'm a little bit off, but let me show you actually. Here it is. Okay.
No, you're spot on.
Oh, yeah. This, see how teeny weeny that is? That's a $1 gold coin. That means that if you had that, or you had a $1 bill, or you had a silver dollar, in 1913, you could have bought 11 loaves of bread with either one of those.
Yeah.
Okay. Today, or at least
crazy.
the last time I checked, so it could be a little different today,
Mhm.
but the last time I checked, maybe you got a quarter of a loaf of bread, maybe, with the dollar bill. You could still get 11 loaves of bread with the silver dollar.
Yeah.
But
That
you get
just shows you.
Exactly. You get 135 loaves with this $1 gold coin,
The $1.
20th of an ounce of
Yeah.
gold.
It holds its value.
Voila.
Well, it didn't just hold
That's
its
money.
value; it substantially grew as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Wait till
Wait
they
until
do
the
that
dominoes
reset.
fall. That's right. Once
Yeah,
the
wait,
reset comes, and I love how you said it earlier. All that debt out there is going to be looking for the finite amount of physical gold to sit under in order to balance it out in some way, fashion, form, whatever. But it's going to throw these to astronomical prices. And of course, by that time, I don't think anyone will be able to get physical gold. At the same time, we see everyone going digital. If we're going digital, it's more compelling than ever now to own physical assets when everything is going digital. That's where the saying comes, own nothing and be happy. It's all going to be tokenized and forget it.
You know, maybe you could explain something that just
Pisses me off.
recently happened that I'm like, how did they do that? It was on the FTX debt or the FTX problem.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the debt that was missing, and they turned it into an NFT, and then they sold the NFT.
Oh, they basically laundered money.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
is that
Yes,
how they
that
did
makes
that?
Yeah.
sense.
So
It really
basically,
does.
yeah. So
Because that
you
makes no
can-
sense to me, like at all.
you-
I can't quite understand what they did there.
Well, I could give you an example. Tether, it's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be pegged to the dollar 1-to-1. It's basically
Right.
digital dollar, but it's just like the dollar because it's backed by nothing, and they avoid so many audits. It's just printed out of thin air digitally, and they just pump it, print it into the system. And interestingly, every time they do that, you see a huge influx in price of Bitcoin. So, but what they do, they print the money out of thin air, and they could purchase an NFT, and you could now go sell it or convert it.
Well, that's what they
there's
do. A
there's
lot
so
of
many
money
things you can
laundering.
do.
A lot of money laundering in this crypto space, and really, and I hate to say this, but you could tie a lot of these digital assets to trafficking.
You could buy some art, for example. You buy it yourself, and then you sell it back to yourself, and now it looks like it has some volume and activity, and it looks
Right.
like it has value now because somebody paid a certain amount for it, which was really you.
It
now it
is
has,
a Ponzi scheme too.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I know we're getting close to the end.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, Lynette, could we ask you for your outlook on the rest of the year? What do you think is to come? I know there's a lot going on, but how do you see things unfolding as we move towards the middle and end of the year, going
Well,
into 2024?
there has to be, because we talked about the LIBOR SOFR shift. We already know what happened with SVB and what's happening in the banking sector. I don't know that they can keep the lid on it. I don't know that they even want to keep the lid on it too much longer. I think, you know, I felt that there was going to be a crisis the beginning part of the year, and we did. We had the regional banking crisis.
Yes.
I think there's going to be something bigger before the end of this year, because it's like a bomb, right? There's just, it's so packed with garbage. And even though the world is not likely to explode on the 30th of June with this transition, that just adds so much more pressure to what the banks and the corporations and the central banks are already sitting on top of. So I think that, you know, I love the name of your show, The Black Swan Capitalist. I think there will be a black swan event that nobody can really see, because that's the whole point of a black
That's the
swan.
point.
Yes, unforeseen event.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see something really nasty between now and the end of the year. And so you need to be ready. And another reason why I say that is, look at how far they've pushed gold. I mean, like, what, 1926
Yeah.
or something like that, inside of crisis after crisis after crisis. Sure, makes sense to me. If the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, certainly gold should go down. Gold doesn't
Oh,
have to
God.
pay interest because it's the safest thing that you can do.
That's why the BIS moved it to a tier 1 asset class in 2019, which means zero risk.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's the safest thing you can own. And
Exactly.
another reason for why central banks have been accumulating more than ever. Andy dropped a bunch of information on that yesterday when we talked to him. But as you
When
said
you see
before,
him the next time, tell him I love him. I do.
Versan,
He'd say the
you
same
tell him.
thing.
Yeah,
You tell-
we've been speaking on
We
the
will.
phone every now and then. He's trying to introduce us to Robert.
Yeah, we
Oh,
want to have.
Kiyosaki.
Yeah, we
Mhm.
want to talk to him about Bitcoin because we know Robert Kiyosaki is a big advocate for Bitcoin, but our argument there, which is very compelling, is that Bitcoin is a direct competitor and a threat to the central banks because they want to have a CBDC that is fully controlled and centralized. So why would they allow Bitcoin to flourish unless it's just temporarily? They're going to pull the rug at some point, somehow. But as for events that could unfold as we move down this road of uncertainty, who knows? It could be a liquidity crisis with the banks. It could be a bank freeze, as Jim Rickards talks about. You
Ice
know,
nine.
bank freeze. You know, ICE 9 is what he calls it. That's realistic. That could
Yes.
happen. A bail-in, or even a cyber attack, since that's a narrative they've been pushing.
Well, and supposedly we've been at war for the last 3 years in cyberspace.
Yep.
And that, that's the other part. Why do we need physical boots on the ground when really the big danger is in cyberspace? Because that's what people can see.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. If
Yeah.
you want to get away with something, you do it quietly. The best way to do that is through computers and technology. At the same time, you can keep the masses distracted with gizmos and gadgets.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
that's what George Carlin said once. He was ahead of his time.
Wasn't he, though? He also said it's a big club and you ain't in it.
Yeah, and I know you like to say
Yeah.
that too. It's true.
It is
Lynette,
true.
any last words? Anything you want to share with the audience or with us before we let you go?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest challenge for most people is procrastination because they're
Agreed.
not really sure what's going to happen. But I want you to just think about the fact that if you buy physical gold and you're holding it, that's the worst thing that happens. You actually have something that central banks are accumulating because it is indeed the safest thing that you can do. Booty hooty, Rudy Manooty, you have physical gold. So get it done. Get a strategy in place to put you in the best possible position to sustain a reasonable standard of living and also take advantage of this crisis that, I mean, it's just inevitable because there's no purchasing power left. Central banks are out of tools, the system's dead, and we're shifting into a new system. You want to keep your freedom and your power and your choices and your control. You own gold and you own silver.
You got to fight for it. That's right.
Yeah.
And you have the opportunity.
Yes.
Very,
all do.
very well said. Well, again, thank you so much, Lynette, for joining us today. It's always great chatting with you, and I'm looking forward to us doing this again, like very soon.
Absolutely. It's been great. Thank you for having me.
Well, you take care of yourself, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Bye-bye.
All right.